Rebecca Long-Bailey, how's it going?
All right, thanks very much.
We're in overcast Salford.
Yeah, it's not normally like this, normally sunny.
Costa del Salford.
Costa del Salford, exactly.
So what does this place mean to you?
It was home, and it's, I mean, literally, 5 minutes away from here is where I was born, and I spent my formative years as a child. And it's changed beyond recognition. It used to be a disused docks, and it shows what vision can do. And it was at the time, in the 80s, many years ago, when some of our Labour councillors were talking about redeveloping the docks and turning it into what it is today. Everyone thought they were mad.
Yeah.
But they kind of pressed ahead with the vision, and now it is what it is, and it's really good.
In terms of the area, you talk about the way they've redone it. Obviously, they've brought Media City in.
Yeah.
And that's given a greater focus on the north in terms of the media.
Yeah.
In your speech, you talked about the media.
Yeah.
And in effect, like whatever you say in the speech, it really doesn't matter. What matters is what the people see and how it's broadcast. Do you worry about how the media portray you or the Labour Party?
I do. We have to be honest that there are certain elements of the media that are never going to be friendly with the Labour Party, and any leader of the Labour Party isn't going to get an easy time. So thinking we can pick a candidate that's suddenly going to become, amenable and positive in that media context is a fallacy, really. But I think what we haven't done for many years now is have a robust strategy in counteracting that negative media. And that's why we need to have a comprehensive media operation that rebuts a rebuttal unit I've talked about previously. So whenever we see misinformation or smears, we're on it straight away, because once that goes through the media and it's laundered by other media outlets, I know this from my own campaign to become leader, when you see something that isn't true and then it suddenly starts on Twitter and appears in the mainstream press, many people just read the headline, and that's negative. They don't tend to read the whole article most of the time, and the damage is done then, and we need to be quicker at rebutting that and more ferocious. And I think we've also got to have a more exciting and innovative social media platform and embrace new media forms as well, like yourselves and other kind of new startups, to try and get our message out to places where it ordinarily wouldn't have reached before. But we also need to up our game on social media. We're way behind the Conservatives in this general election campaign. So we need a unit, and I talked about this in the speech, about having a specific unit that concentrates on digital within the party, producing viral content on a scale that we've never seen before, so that our communities can share it and we can get our message out in not just the normal party political broadcast way, but in really fun ways that the message starts to filter through.
I mean, you talk about that, but like a lot of the most powerful Facebook pages weren't affiliated with the Conservative Party. They were sort of there were Facebook pages with large following that had a large right-wing sort of bias, and essentially, like, will you be able to pull that back? Because you're playing catch-up, really, aren't you?
We are playing catch-up, and I think we left our social media campaigning in 2017, where we were ahead of the curve and people were starting to get excited about some of the content that was being put out from various groups within the party. But we didn't recognise that the Conservatives had gone one stage further, and they weren't just putting things out and expecting their party members to share it. They were targeting different demographics, and we were picking it up on the doorstep when we heard people who had a certain hobby were getting a video about Jeremy and Diane, and they said, we've had this video on our Facebook feed about Jeremy and Diane, and this is what it says. And that was the Conservatives. Even though they might not have directly done it, they had groups and organisations working with them to push out that viral content, and it was quite insidious and misrepresentative and untrue in most cases, and that's very dangerous. Because of course, if you find a funny video, you want to share it with your friends and things like that, and that's what a lot of people were doing.
And do you have to give credit to the Conservatives? Like for instance, the Love Actually video that they did. Do you have to sort of hold your hand up and say that was a good ploy?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of our MPs had actually done it themselves beforehand, so they were ripping her off, really. But we need to do that. We've got to reach people on an emotional level, and it's not about, the big party political broadcasts anymore. They have a place, but we've got to produce the viral content, the things that make people laugh and really relate to their lives, talking about funny things that have happened, and we don't do that. We come across as sometimes, and this is how the Tories want to portray us, as part of the establishment when we're not part of the establishment. And in 2017 we started breaking away from that, and we had really cool videos and they were starting to go out and people found it quite exciting, and then we didn't really do that much to progress that.
And what's the maddest thing you've seen about yourself?
I was married to a millionaire called Steve, apparently. I had to shut this down and whatever. Luckily, I had time to be looking at my Twitter at the time, and I saw this post from one of the right-wing Twitter blogs saying, Rebecca Long Bailey, she says she's a socialist, but she's married to this guy called Steve who is going to inherit a multi-million-pound family fortune in the chemicals industry. And I was like, am I? He's kept that quiet. And I like rang up my husband and I was like, is there any like relatives or anything like that they've never told us that we're like in line to receive this like enormous like inherited wealth? And he's like, no. So then I did it straight away and I said, oh, you're talking about the wrong Steve there. And they were like, oh, sorry. But I mean, I would have took that on the chin for everyone, by the way. But that was crazy. Yeah. And the other ones have been like nastier ones. It's trying to cast aspersions on things that I've said in the past. So, I mean, one bizarre one was I did a video where I said that I was born to the roar of the Stretford End, because that's the thing that my mum's always said to me. And people in Salford say it like, oh, I was born to the roar of the Stretford End. It doesn't mean you were physically born on the halfway line in the middle of a football match. So certain elements of the media came out and said she couldn't have been born to the roar of the Stretford End because on the day she was born, Man United were playing away. It's like, well, I was actually born in a hospital, for God's sake, in Withington. You know, it's a saying. And I grew up next to the football ground, and that's why my mum said it to me, and that was bizarre. But it was, you know, trying to cast aspersions in these kind of really kind of insidious and very subtle ways, and that's how they chip away at your character, really.
Yeah. In terms of the whole campaign to be Labour leader, how do you find the atmosphere between your sort of rivals? Because, like, presumably, I mean, you're seeing a lot of each other, you're in green rooms, like, is it tense? No,
it's not really. We're all very friendly with each other. I mean, we've got a job to do now, and we've got to set ourselves apart from each other, and we've got to try and do it in a way where we show each other's differences without being horrible about it. And it's easy, like, for example, we had the first hustings on Newsnight this week, and normally if you're up against a Tory, you'll constantly interrupt, you'll tell them when they're wrong, and you feel a bit apprehensive about doing that with your own colleagues because they're in your party. Maybe it'll get a bit more feisty.
Do you ever, because obviously, like, you're from Salford, so by default you're the hardest. Do you ever, like, Salford it up? Do you, like, hide Keir Starmer's, like, comb, or do you sort of, like, give evils to, like Nandi or anything? Like, just proper sort of.
I've been nice so far, but you're giving me ideas.
Yeah,
now.
just like
maybe
give
take
like
it to the next level.
Thornbury like a dead arm or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you think? I mean, kind of speaking about that. Do you think like you have to play a bit tough with the Conservatives, like properly go after them and sort of like even get a bit personal?
I mean, I don't like getting personal. That's one of the things I don't like about politics, particularly on individual things that they've done or their family and stuff like that. I think that's wrong. You shouldn't ever go after somebody's kind of background and whatnot. But things that they've said to do with policy and their decisions that they've made in government, you should definitely attack them, because our job as an opposition is to scrutinise everything that they've done and call out where we see that there have been wrongdoings or misrepresentations or misinformations or bad decision making. That's our job, so we should always call it out.
Yeah. You talk about aspirational socialism. Do you add the word aspirational because socialism's got like a bit of a... It means something else to people that is separate from aspirational sort of living?
The thing about socialism is that a lot of people don't really know what socialism means, and they haven't understood that the whole point of socialism and all the policies that we put in place to invest in public services, education, health, council housing, democratic public ownership of our utilities, it's all there to raise up people's aspirations. And the Conservatives talk about aspiration, but they're not an aspirational party. If you get on under a Conservative government, then good for you, because it was out of sheer luck that you did what you did. And what we want to achieve, or what I want to achieve, is that society where aspiration happens to everyone and you realise those aspirations. And it's not just about individual aspiration, people doing well, getting paid well, enough to have a decent life and a house and a car and be able to go on holiday, whatever job they've got, whatever their income group. But it's about community aspiration as well, and being the best that we can possibly be. Like, we're in, Salford Quays today, and that's the kind of vision of in how investment transforms part of a community into an area that we can all be proud of. But many other areas of Salford are in decline, and we need that investment in our public realm, because our communities are really proud. They're proud of each other and what we do and how we support each other. And we want places to live in that reflect that pride, decent swimming pools, decent libraries, nice high streets that we can potter about on a Saturday. That's about community aspiration.
In terms of your sort of history, like you worked in a pawn shop.
Yeah.
And like where I grew up, there was like pawn shops, and like you'd walk past and it would be like, you'd get excited because like you'd see like a Spectrum or an Amstrad or whatever, but then you'd kind of think, well, actually, that was some kids.
Someone had that, yeah.
Like, how did that make you feel working somewhere like that, where it was essentially just like an array of broken dreams where people had to bring things in?
That's right. And I mean, we didn't sell anything in the shop that people had come into pawn. I think what used to happen was the person who owned the shop went to an auction, so all of the stuff that was in the shop was stuff from everywhere else.
Yeah.
So nobody would ever come in and see a ring in the window that was theirs, but it was someone's ring. And you'd get people coming in and they'd be desperate. You know, they'd be pawning family heirlooms and gifts from their children and their grandchildren just to make ends meet. And most of the time they weren't coming in with massive diamond rings and saying, oh, I'd like £500 on that. They were coming in with like a little kind of sovereign peso ring or a ring with Nan on it and asking for a tenner because they needed to do a shop. And sometimes they could never come back again. And obviously when the period runs out that you have that time to pay back the loan, if you don't pay it back, that's your stuff gone. And sometimes they'd come in after that and say, oh, I'm late, can I get the ring back? And you'd have to say, I'm sorry, you know, it's ran out, you can't. Or sometimes they'd come in and they'd give you a ring and you knew that you'd weigh it and you'd know that you could only give them a tenner, and they'd be like, can you give us 20 quid? And I'm really, really desperate this week. And I'd know who they were, and you know, I'd know that they were good for it and that they probably would come back. And that was soul destroying, because I was like, I want to be able to give it to them, but I can't because I'll be sacked because my boss is there watching me, and I can't give them more than the ring is, you know, defined as being worth it under the pawnbrokers industry or whatever it is, or that particular boss's you know, assessment.
I've been told I'm supposed to have a gotcha moment in sort of interviews.
Go on,
like
then.
this. So here's my gotcha moment. Did you or did you not bribe school kids with stickers?
I did.
So could you explain yourself?
So in 1997, I was in secondary school and we did a mock general election, and I, for some reason, decided to be the Labour candidate, and my election strategy was going to the Labour Party office locally and demanding rolls of stickers. And I used to go around at lunchtime handing out stickers to all the kids on the field. And I think I promised to save all the dolphins as well, because that was a big thing in our schools. Like, vote Labour, we'll save all the dolphins. That is done.
All the dolphins in Salford Keys.
And I won anyway by a landslide, so it was good. So the stickers worked.
See? Playing dirty works.
Yeah.
That's
it's not a campaign if you've not got merch.
Exactly. Speaking of merch, do you love onions?
I love unions, and someone put on Twitter, because it's I Love Unions Week this week, and I think, you know, the Labour Party is the trade unions as well as its members, and we need to work with our trade unions if we're going to win the next general election, and empower them, and make sure that all our Labour members are members of trade unions. And we want more Labour members. I want at least 1 million by the time I've finished building up the party. And Love Unions Week is a week where you put these badges on and you go out and you tell everybody how great trade unions are. But I had the badge on Newsnight the other night, and somebody tweeted afterwards, like, why has Rebecca Long-Bailey got a Love Onions badge on?
Amazing. In terms of one of the things that's sort of quite evident is how much you admire Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
Is that a tricky thing to sort of tackle? Because like obviously like there was a big defeat in the last election, and therefore like Jeremy Corbyn's almost seen as like something that people don't want to be associated with.
Yeah.
Do you find it hard to sort of like deal with the fact that sort of like people are trying to sort of move you away from Jeremy Corbyn, or do you find it difficult to sort of it feels like you're almost being encouraged to sort of like slag him off?
Yeah. No, I mean, I like Jeremy. He was an honest, decent, principled politician. He had the same beliefs that I did, and that's why I supported him to become the leader, and I'd never say anything bad about him. But we lost the general election, so liking, you know, Jeremy as a person is completely different from recognising the reasons as to why we had that devastating defeat. And I won't be shy about saying why I think we lost and what we could have done better, and that's what I've been doing.
And in terms of people saying you're a continuity candidate, does that do your head in a little bit? Simply because like he's like a bloke who was brought up in the 50s
Yeah.
And like you're like a woman who's sort of like a working class woman from the north who was brought up in the 1980s.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it's disrespectful, if I'm honest, to be called a continuity candidate. I'm proud of what we've developed over the last 5 years and the policies that we drove forward. And Jeremy and John and Diane and the wider team will be remembered for shifting the party from a place of, you know, that we needed to develop more hope and more vision. And I believe in that, and I'm an aspirational socialist, I'm a democratic socialist. I've never wavered on my principles, on what I believe in. So I know where we need to get to and I know how we're going to get there. And it's not about trading in your values for a nice suit. You wear a nice suit, but you have your values and your vision as well. And you tell our communities that the Labour Party is the party that will better the quality of their lives. And that's something that didn't come out in the last general election, and people didn't believe that we were going to do that, despite having policies that would have done that.
So in terms of the policies that sort of you'll take forward, is your sort of plan to sort of focus in on particular policies and sort of drum those like whenever you can, rather than sort of like having an array?
Yeah, and then that's one of the problems with the election, that it's quite scattergun. And you can have a manifesto with lots of great policies in, but you pick out key ones that you know will resonate with your communities, and you tie those around a message that explains what they're actually for. And we didn't do that in the last election. And there are other elements within the manifesto that were part of what I can only describe as a longer term programme. And it's not that they shouldn't have been in the manifesto, but maybe it might have been helpful to set them aside and put them in a longer term programme. So things that weren't going to be delivered within 5 years, but were our goal. So the 4-day working week's an example of that. I agree with the policy, but we wouldn't have done it in 5 years because we would have never achieved that until we'd improved productivity, we'd strengthened trade unions so that they could collectively bargain, and we wouldn't have achieved it in particular sectors until those sectors were ready to do it. But when that policy landed, many people thought, oh, everyone's going to go on a 4-day week, and that was never the plan. It was a long-term aspiration. So differentiating between your manifesto policies that you deliver within 5 years and your longer-term programme is really, really important.
Well, I mean, part of that, I suppose, was sort of during the election, you had different Labour MPs saying different things and sort of slightly contradicting each other. And one criticism that Corbyn faced was like, how can he lead the country where like he struggles sometimes to lead his party?
Yeah.
Do you think that you'll be able to get like a common consensus and like everyone a message?
I mean, it wasn't just in the general election. This has been going on for 4 years, where we've had colleagues going onto the media and saying different things and not following the party line, or smearing each other, or smearing Jeremy and saying things that, you know, undermine him as a credible leader. And that has to stop. And of course, we're all going to have different views. We're a broad church, and it's good to have different groups in the party pushing for different things, to have those different views, because that's what makes us electable, when we understand the wide range of opinion that's out there. But once we make a decision on what our final position is, we all come together around the party line, and that's where we go out completely unified and sell that message. The Conservatives, for all their infighting, and they're more ferocious than we are, they do it behind closed doors. And then every single MP is out there on the benches parroting the party line again and again and again. And that's what they did in this general election as well, with the Get Brexit Done message. They were all saying it, whether they agreed with it or not. And that's what we need to realise, because divided parties don't win. In
terms of if you became Labour leader, the Tories have got a massive majority. So isn't it a hopeless task? Like, what can you actually do? What can you do until the next election? Like, how effective can you be with no power?
We're in a difficult place in Parliament because they do have such a big majority, but there are crises that we've got to tackle urgently, and the climate crisis is one of them. If we wait on taking action until the next election, which potentially could be in 2024, we're in a very dangerous place, because the action needs to be taken now. So the way to push the government to take more radical and robust action in the way that we want them to is to build a movement. And that's not just about the Labour Party and the trade unions. That's about working with climate groups, working with schools and striking activists, working in workplaces and with businesses who are in the renewables industry, and trying to get that groundswell of pressure to force the government to take the action that we know they need to take. The same is true with the Brexit trade talks. We've got to scrutinise what the government's doing. We know that they don't believe in the same things that we do. We know they wouldn't have any qualms about watering down workers' rights, but we've got to be looking over their shoulder every step of the way, and we've got to make it publicly known when they're not doing the right thing. But we've also got to build that support around us within the community and within business and wider industry, so that we have those voices coming out and pressuring the government to make the right choices.
In terms of Brexit, like it's happening now, like in the Labour Party there was like people that were pro, people that were anti. Do you think Brexit can now be a positive thing? Can you put a positive spin on Brexit? Does it actually open up opportunities?
We can't spend the next 4 years in a bunker waiting for the opportunity to tell our voters that they got it wrong and look how terrible it is, because that would be absolutely disastrous. So we've got to set out a positive vision of what Britain can look like outside of the European Union, and that will be our job, building that vision from an industrial strategy to a green industrial revolution, to properly run public services where we insource and we stop the privatisation and set out that positive vision of the future. And I think our communities would thank us for that. And of course, we've got a job to scrutinise and to push back against decisions that the government's making on reforming the immigration system, on the trade deals that they get with the European Union. But our job is to look ahead and not just be stuck in the here and now. And that was part of the problem with the election campaign, is that we spent so much time, or certain people spent so much time within Parliament playing games, trying to stop certain things from happening. And our communities didn't understand the reasons as to why we were doing it. They just saw us playing games in Parliament and being part of an establishment that was trying to stop Brexit from happening. They didn't realise that many of us were trying to stop no deal. So we can't just be in that bubble. We've got to be out there showing places like Salford, Blythe, Brixton what their future could look like under a Labour government, what jobs their children are going to have, what kind of industries, factories, shops and businesses are going to be in their areas, what their high street is going to look like. And it's about that hope that with every passing generation, life's going to get better, and the place that you live in is going to be nicer and more comfortable, and your homes are going to be better and more comfortable and more affordable. And we've lost that hope of a better life. And that's why I think, as leader, with that vision of hope and aspiration, I think we can win the next general election. And
finally, it's Valentine's Day. Like, who's the most handsome person that's interviewed you today?
Obviously you.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't fishing for that. Well, that's very kind. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.